PJs today. Look at my thick thighs. Oh baby. Alright baby, let's not dilly-dally. We've got 5 books to talk about here. This is my favorite books of 2023. I made a video of that for the first 6 months of this year, which is somewhere on my channel. This is for the second half of the year, from June onwards. I read about 40 or 50 books in the back half of this year, and these were the ones that stood out to me. I can already see that some of them are kind of kooky, so this should be a fun list. It was a good year. It was a good year, other than the Booker Prize being kind of shit, and a couple of other award-winning books being kind of lackluster. I read a lot of good stuff. I'm glad that I went out and I've been reading a lot of the Nobel Prize winners, among other things, and just trying to find the most weird, challenging bullshit I can, and I kind of succeeded. So we'll see. Let's talk about it. First off, we have 2 honourable mentions, which are 2 Aussie books from the past couple of years. It's gotta rep the homeland, I guess. Alright, we've got 2 honourable mentions. First one is Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica Au. I was a big fan of this, actually. I wasn't expecting to be. People say it's a book. It's not really. It's like 90 pages long. It's not a doorstopper. It's more like a cockroach stamper. It's tiny. It's barely a book. It's barely a novella, even. It's like a short story. But as with all Fitzcarraldo edition books, it takes me way longer to read than I thought it was going to, so that's awesome. A mother and daughter, I'm just reading the blurb off Goodreads. A mother and daughter travel from abroad to meet in Tokyo. They walk along the canals, etc. But uncertainties abound. Who is really speaking here? Is it only the daughter? And what is the real reason behind this elliptical, perhaps even spectral journey? Ooh! Don't you love it when a journey is elliptical and spectral? Fuck! Those are the 2 search terms I put in my fucking Kontiki tour search. Yes, will this journey be elliptical and spectral, please? Having said that, the book is really great. I really enjoyed it. It reminded me a lot of the Joanna Hogg film, The Eternal Daughter, just in terms of the kind of uncertainty of what's going on. But the kind of submission to form, like how that movie uses genre to tell its story. It uses the genre of like a horror movie or a classy horror movie. This one is like uses form and uses poetry and uses rhythmic sentences to kind of make more of its point. It's very interesting, and I like how short it is, because with something that short you want that level of enigma to it, you want that rereadability to it, and this book has both of those. There are lots of really great writing. There's a couple of fantastic quotes. Here's one that I really liked. The stairs were low and small because people had once been low and small, and they creaked and were bowed in the middle where they had been shined smooth by many thousands of feet. Through the windows came a soft, milky light, like that through a paper screen. The rhythm of that is just very, it's wonderful to me. It's very consistent. I really like it. It's a great little book. If you've got like an hour or 2 hours, pick it up and just skim through it and see if you'll like it. But yeah, Fitzcarraldo continuing to punish me, basically. Alright, our next honourable mention, another Aussie book, is Grimish by Michael Winkler. I don't have a hard copy for either of these 2, but Grimish, I think it got published in Britain recently. It was up for the Booker Prize and it didn't get nominated because they were not interested in nominating good books that year. This isn't a perfect book at all. The premise is that it follows a man's research of a famous boxer called Joe Grimm who did a tour of Australia. And the book is like constantly fucking with itself. It begins with a review of the book written by the author where he's just bagging on the book and saying, here's all the stuff I missed, which I thought was like fabulously cringe, and I still do. But that was like such a what the fuck moment to start the book with, and then it just devolves into talking about, it's kind of like a violence, it's about masculinity as it pertains to modern day life. It uses just about every possible term for violence, for getting the shit kicked out of you. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it. It was not at all what I expected. It's very strange. But I'm glad it has this attention. It got like a Miles Franklin nomination. That's fucking awesome. Yeah, great book, very strange, would recommend it to just about anyone, honestly, because it's so kooky. Alright, baby, now we're on to my top 5, and I've got a good one to start with. Number 5, da-da-da-da, we have This Other Eden. I promise you this isn't my hipster mind, insisting that I like this book because everyone else hates it. I haven't read it again, because it isn't any good. But I love it. I think it's great, and is there a fucking helicopter over my house? What is this? I read this book online, and I got the hardback of it, and I was reading through it, and I went, yeah, these paragraph breaks suck. When you're reading them on the page, they suck. It's very hard to read. Online, reading it on a computer, I was able to zoom in as much as I wanted, and read it normally. Like, read it with big font, where the paragraph breaks weren't really what he intended, and I found it a lot easier to read, so maybe that's the issue people are having, is that it's very disengaging the way that it's structured on the page. Yeah, I really love the narrator voice in the book, gliding over everything. I think that's really effective. I love a lot of the writing itself. There's a lot of great language. The opening is really great, the ending is really great. The middle continues to evolve. There's very little downtime in the book. It continues to move. The pacing's really strong, I thought. I've read passages of it since I've bought the hardback, and I agree that it is harder to read in that page style, but because I've read it before, I know what I'm expecting and I'm able to take my time with it. If I wasn't taking my time with it and I had the hardback, I probably wouldn't have liked it anywhere near as much, and I would have not panned it, but I would have been like, I can't be fucked to read this properly. Whereas when I read it online, I did. So I think there is something to be said for that, which is why I don't listen to audiobooks, because my opinion is just so radically different on audiobooks than it is if I just read the fucking book. And also audiobooks take forever, but I'm getting sidetracked. Either way, I really like this How to Eat and Go Fuck Yourself. I think it's pretty good. Right, the next book on the list is another short book, and it's the only one I don't really have a hard copy for, and that is The Passport by Hatamula. I've only read one of her books so far this year. I was gonna read The Land of Green Plums, is that what it's called? But that was the only one I ended up getting to, and I thought it was fucking fantastic. The premise is it's an account of the Nicolae Ceausescu regime, which I think was Romanian or Hungary. He was a dictator, he was a communist dictator, and he created something of a tyranny for himself in that period. And I have read through other parts of Hatamula's books. I read through, I think it was called The Appointment, and it seems like in those books she's getting into the city lens of that kind of dictatorship, the thoughts that go on when you live in the city. It's much more oppressive, it's more like, intense. It is more intense in the city, and they're thinking everything I do is being monitored, I'm gonna fucking die, there's secret police everywhere. And then this book, The Passport, is more interesting because it's a country view of that. So this is like the inverse of Prophet Song to me, where Prophet Song is, again, the view from the city where shit starts building up. This book is the view from the country, and there's no direct interference of communist parties in it, not really at least, there's a couple of points. But for the most part, it's following someone from the country realizing that this is affecting nature. It causes the communist dictatorship to have this really, like, overpowering, omnipresent view when the party is kind of symbolic of the decay of nature in this environment. It follows this guy who's trying to transfer towns from the shitty little town he lives in, and it's structured almost like short stories where in every short story he meets someone new or he does something new, and it's broken up into very separate chapters, and it follows that kind of like Zama. It follows him trying to leave the town, and it's just about the kind of staleness of living in the one spot, but it's also about the communist dictatorship. It's also about how that is destroying society and affecting the environment. It's kind of an allegory, and it's also a far-removed look at a place in the same country as that. It's very interesting. It's a weird little book. I would thoroughly recommend it. I thought it was great. But it's very strange. It's kind of foul. It's very unlikable. It's a very unlikable book. There's a lot of like mean characters. It's like vaguely pretentious. But I think it's great, and I can't wait to read more of her other stuff and kind of see what she got the Nobel Prize for. Because from this small book, I definitely get it. Right, okay, book 3. This is a good one. I haven't decided what I want to make book 3 yet. Let's go that one. Hang on, let me just fucking arrange my pile here. Alright, number 3 on my list. It's nothing but bangers from here. Nothing but bangers. We have The Stone Diaries by Carol Shields, baby. Let's go. The Stone Diaries is incredibly powerful. It's just about the most emotional response I've ever gotten from a book, where I was like tearing up and I was like, get fucked, this is so very sad. It's so when you have a book like fucking A Little Life, right? When A Little Life just spams trauma at you and you're meant to cry, what people like, that to me is the equivalent of like a comedy movie spamming fart jokes. You can laugh at it, but you can't say it's good art, right? Just in the same way you can't say A Little Life is good art because it is bad art. The Stone Diaries is like the complete 180 of that. It's like existentially sad. It's existentially terrifying. It's incredibly sad. And it hits you in a way that's totally intended and earned, and a dark place that I never see authors go ever. It's so grim. The premise of the book is it follows this woman called Daisy Goodwill, I think her name is, from birth to death, and she has a weird birth where she's born on the kitchen floor in somewhere in Canada, I think, and then her life slowly starts to get meaning, and characters around her become interested in stone, and one of her husbands falls out a window, and then she dies. And the back half of this book, the last 50 to 100 pages, 50 pages, are some of the most grim, terrifying, depressing shit I've ever read as she succumbs to death and she starts to lose her memory and she becomes afraid. It's so fucking mean, especially like the last line of this book is the most devastating thing ever, and I read that and I was like, no, Carol, you son of a bitch, her life did matter, you motherfucker. But that's the point. It's about making her life, this ordinary character's life, transcendent and totally applicable to every part of life. Her birth is strange and extraordinary, but then a lot of the mystery and magic of her youth is drowned out in adulthood, and then by the end, a lot of it gains this kind of sad relevance as she looks back, and then she dies. And then there's her funeral, and there's a line that someone says which pissed me off. I was angry for like a week after I finished the book. I was like, fuck, no, this is so sad. Right, number 2 on my list. Number 2 and 3 are kind of interchangeable with each other, with regards to how I like them. That one is more of like an emotional piece. This one is like a flawless, poetic masterwork. Ooh! And that is Omeros by Derek Walcott. You can't say Omeros, you have to say Omeros, pussy. So Omeros is impossible to describe. It is, so Derek Walcott is a Nobel Prize winner. He's from the island of Saint Lucia, and I believe that's owned by the British. And he writes poetry, and this is a poetic long work inspired by Homeric works like the Odyssey and the Iliad. But it's not about that. It's about the history of his island nation, and it's about the effect of colonialism on the island nation, but it's also about the writer's attempt to discuss colonialism through a white lens of Homeric epics. It's insane. It's awesome. It's so good. There's a lot of different characters. There's 2 fishermen who are constantly fighting, and they have this big war with each other. There's like an old couple that symbolize the British, and then the author himself comes in every now and again and says, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And again, everything he's trying to do is surmised through Homeric intent, through Homeric metaphor, and through that structure, but the structure starts to break apart as the book goes on, and it starts to split in different directions, and characters are walking on the bottom of the sea, and it's jumping back and forth in time. It's amazing. You need to read it with the Spark Notes open on your laptop. You need to read a chapter of this, and you go to the Spark Notes and you go, right, that's what that meant, right, that's what that meant. That's how I read it, and that's how I loved it. As it is, it's readable, but it is kind of impenetrable. But it is fantastic. He won the Nobel Prize for it. It's crazy. It's incredibly florid. He's got a very metaphorical, beautiful writing voice that he uses. The structure is all very similar. It's 3-sentence breaks, and he writes with such a keen love of his homeland that's also kind of ironic because of the people he's choosing to show it through. But the book itself is amazing. It ends really well, really strongly. It's a 5 out of 5. I fucking love it. The only reason I didn't put it at number 1 is because I wanted to tout someone else at number 1. But that book, man, is fucking incredible. Last one! So, when the Booker Prize gave the award to In a Free State, the V.S. Naipaul book, Saul Bellow, who was the judge, said that he awarded the best author but not the best book. And that's kind of what I've done here with my list. Ooh, isn't that interesting? This book that I've got is not my favorite book that I read, but it's my favorite author. It's the author that I've gotten the most out of this year. And the book is The Complete Gary Lutz. Gary Lutz, or Gary L. Lutz, is an American short story writer. Their short stories are usually quite short. They've published about 6 or 7 works of short story collections over a period of about 30 years. It is some of the strangest writing you'll ever read. So basically, the reason I love this, I've been in this massive depressive period this year, and it was like, it's just this like nauseating feeling of starting days over and constantly having to move through your life. And Gary Lutz is like the person I found who kind of gets that the most, understands kind of a depressive mind the best. When you read one of her books, or one of her short stories, every sentence is very weird and very specifically written. She credits Gordon Lish for this, who's another weird transgressive writer. And Gordon Lish talks about the concept of consecution, which is like deliberate intuition, and feeling in your mind what the next word should be, and you write it like that. And that's kind of what Gary L. Lutz does. Well, it is what Gary L. Lutz does. It's very strange writing. Some of her short stories are available online. You should definitely pick one up and read them. They're about, like, the depression, the mechanical depression of ordinary people stuck in daily lives and just constantly living their life. In her short stories, it's like, time is kind of irrelevant because all of these sentences are very self-contained. Her short stories could take place over 50, 100 years and it would still make sense. Time doesn't matter in the books. Gender doesn't matter in the books either. It was interesting reading her short stories knowing that she was transgender, because I feel like if I didn't know that, I would be reading them differently. But when you read them like that, that kind of angst about it, like the angst of gender is in there too. Which I found very interesting, and it's not what I would have concentrated on as I read them. Certain images do reoccur over time. There's the image of like a teacher trying to seduce a student. There's images of like a love story in like a dilapidated building, or there's stories of like people leaving rooms and the main character being interested in what they've left behind, or trying to like pick pieces out of different people in like a physical sense. There's one story that's very memorable where she's trying to pick a pube out of the carpet, and it's metaphorical, but that's what the stories are about. It's about people trying to dissect other people and trying their best not to live their own life because their own life is boring and depressive. And the way that she shows that is through weird language and very complex sentence structures. When you read it, it's very weird. It's almost like you're reading a checklist of something. It's very strange. But these short stories are fantastic, and they're very effective. When you read them, you're thinking, if you read like one a day, you're thinking about that short story for the whole day. There's always something in the writer that's wrestling to get out, and it feels like Gary L. Lutz is constantly trying to humiliate themselves to get that out. She's been called transgressive. I don't know what she would think of that. It feels like she's transgressive by necessity to make her point. But I feel like what she's talking about, even though a lot of them are related to sex and sexual relationships, I feel like a lot of that is being distilled through the lens of a mind of someone who is depressed, or a mind of someone who is looking to escape their own life and just incapable of doing it. They've searched through every avenue, and this is like the last one left for them. When you read one of the stories, you feel like the sentences and the story itself has been belabored over for like 20 years. There's nothing like it. I mean, if you open to any page, you're gonna find a sentence that's like, what the fuck is that? The short stories are disturbing in a way about what she's talking about. Like, the plot of it, as it were, is disturbing. But what she's talking about is actually very wistful and sad, and the undertone of every single short story, which does evolve as the writer gets older. I mean, this is a collection across like 25, 30 years. The feeling of it is one of almost like a romantic looking for something that will complete the life, or even start a life. But for the most part, it's people... I loved one review of on Goodreads that I saw of it, where it said, people moving mechanically from one place to the other. That's what it is. That's what these are about. It's about mechanical movement of people as drones who don't really exist. And that's... it's very impactful, especially for someone who's been very depressed this year. It helps a lot in translating that. That's what this book has done. It's great. I think it's a fantastic author, one of my new favorites, and definitely I rushed out to get this book. It was very hard to find, actually. Hard to find without being like 40 bucks. But I got it, and I've read it all once now. I'm going to read it through for a second time. In terms of authors that I love and authors that inspire me, they're often two different things. Like, the kind of authors I love are never the kind of authors I would try to imitate. Whereas authors that I'm not hugely fond of are authors that I can pick apart more and I'm inspired by the gaps that they have. For example, like Patricia Lockwood, I'm interested in why that doesn't work for me. And that's something that inspires me. Whereas this is an author that I love and I am inspired by. It's one of very few, I feel, where it's an author that I love, but it's an author I also love to pick apart. I also love to understand from short story to short story. And from collection to collection, there's like 10-year gaps. And in these 10-year gaps, it feels like the author does change a little bit. They gain a different perspective, but the core of it is still the same. Language is used as a covering tool. It's used as a coping mechanism almost. And it feels like the writer is kind of forcing themselves to do it. They don't even necessarily want to write, which may not be the case, but that's how it feels, and it helps the stories to feel that way. It's fantastic. I wouldn't say I recommend it to everybody. When you read them, you'll kind of get sort of uncomfortable chills with them. You'll be like, wow, this is really odd. This is really awful. But it's deliberately that way. And I think that it just came to me at the right time. I'm the right kind of person for it. And I fucking love it. So that's my favorite book that I've read in the second half of this year. And it's probably my favorite book that I've read all of this year. It's getting my little pride of place on my shelf. I keep changing my story when in fact it could not be more straightforward or plain. It is a story of none too many people, least of all me. But set me down where there is a bigger turnout and I am 1 minute picking somebody up, the next minute getting myself picked up. I have no heart for upholding the difference or keeping myself laden with the life of me even this far. It is too much like work. Boom! That's the concluding quote. Anyway, yeah, that's my list. I hope you guys have enjoyed. I hope I've given you some recommendations. I can't wait for next year. The International Booker Prize starts soon, and in 2024 I look to do some new fun ideas with the channel that hopefully should expand to new heights the concept of the Disco Kid. Thank you all very much. I've been watching all of your best of 2023 lists, and I've seen a lot of interesting books I didn't know exist, so I'll be making sure to read those as well. Make sure to tell me what your favorites are in the comments. Bully me for putting this other Eden on. But Prophet Song is so much better. Woo! Thanks guys, bye!